Hello and welcome to the Fuck Trauma podcast with me, Candice. I am so excited to have you here for the first podcast of 2025, the first podcast episode of 2025. I know that it is at the end of January, so I haven't done so well there. But if you haven't already, please, please, please do follow the podcast because the Fuck Trauma podcast is one of my key focuses for 2025. So I promise there is a lot more incredible content and episodes that are coming your way. And because I do what I do for you, I always love to hear if there are particular topics that you want to have me address, then please do send me a DM on IG or send me an email and let me know what those are because I do always want to hear your feedback. So, this episode, actually, I've been asked this question so many times, many questions about this. So, this episode is really about friendships and attachment styles and navigating friendships as an anxious attachment style. And yes, I will touch on the dynamics of navigating friendships with avoidance as well. As it's actually something that when I was anxiously attached, I had to navigate all of these friendships myself, in particular some tricky ones with avoidance, which I will share. And I definitely have some tips of how to improve those friendships. Um, so I want to share that. And, you know, this firstly, I apologize if you can hear that I'm a bit nasally. It is cold in London at the moment, and I've just got over a cold and a flu. So I'm sorry if that's still lingering. I feel like I can hear it as I'm speaking. Um, but I just want to share a little bit about how this episode came about. Apart from the fact I have been asked these questions before, I felt inspired to create this episode and make this episode the first episode of 2025, which I wasn't really sure which one would be because I have many great topics coming. Um, but a few weekends ago, I was in Paris for a little January getaway. I've literally never been away in January. I've never done that before. So it was really interesting to have something booked and done already ticked for the first month of January. And you might have seen on my stories or my newsletter that this year I'm trying to be more of a planner. I'm actually not that great at planning basically. And so therefore sometimes time just goes past me and then I'll be like, oh damn, I didn't do anything. So I guess Paris was a great way for me to start planning. And I have a friend that suggested let's go away in January, and I was just like, yeah, okay, because I'm a planner now. We just got it booked, and it was great. I don't regret it. It was amazing, actually. We had a fantastic time. We tried all of these incredible viral restaurants thanks to TikTok. TikTok was my tour guide. We tried, there's a restaurant called Babini. Personally, I didn't rate it. We didn't rate it. And another one called Pink Mama. Again, I didn't rate it, but I did have lovely food when I was there. We also tried the viral hot chocolate. We had some time to kill. It's the one all over TikTok where it's like 12 euros or something, and it comes with lots of whipped cream, and people queue for like hours for it. Now, I'm not a chocolate fan, so I wasn't personally bothered about this at all. But my friend is, and we had some time to kill, so we did try it. It was totally fine. It wasn't my best hot chocolate ever, but it was fine. It was a nice experience. Anyway, but when I was sitting there, I realized my friend that I went with, I've known for 20 years. We've, been best friends for 20 years since I was young. And she has always had a secure attachment style. And our friendship has always been really easy. Like I could go away with her for forever and I just would never feel anything. Like, it does help that we are incredibly similar as people. So I think that does play into it as well. But I just always, our relationship and friendship has just always been really easy. And it made me think about friendships. Now I'm a secure attachment style, so even more so it's easier. But when I was anxious, I definitely had some tricky friendships that I had to navigate. But with a secure attachment, that was never really the trickier relationships. They were the easier relationships for me. And I've always had friendships that were I've always had, my friendships have always come from childhood, basically, from when I was very young, or a teenager, for instance. I've got very strong friendships from then, from many, 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 many years. But as much as those friendships, I have those friendships do come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them are secure, some of them are anxious, and some of them are avoidant. So some of my best friends are avoidance. And I obviously, for many years, I had an anxious attachment style, but I didn't know anything about attachment styles back then. For all of these years and for all of these relative friendships, when we were building the foundations of them, attachment styles were not a thing, and I certainly didn't know I had an anxious attachment style. So I can see now how it definitely played out in a lot of these friendships, definitely, which is what I want to share today, of how to like navigate some of these friendships. So yeah, so for instance, the secure attachment types that I've had, they've always been really easy friendships for me. Even when I was an anxious attachment style, of course, now it's like they're just, I always felt really secure in those friendships. They always tried to understand my anxious tendencies and my anxious thoughts, but I see now that they could never have really understood what was going on. But I didn't know it was an anxious attachment style. I didn't know it was a trauma response. I can see now what was happening. And they were always really good role models for me to know how I was supposed to be, or think, or feel about myself, or feel in my relationships. So they always were really stable people for me to look at. And one thing I always used to, say to people, clients, or people in my, clients or students in my Anxious and Secure in Love program, is that it's always good to look at secure people that you have in your life as a role model, if that's the right way, or like a standard of like, okay, that's how they would see it. They wouldn't take it so personally, or they wouldn't feel anxious about that, or this would be their boundary. It always really helped me, long before I knew what I knew now, and long before I do what I do now, and long before I was a secure attachment. It always really helped me to have those relationships in my life, for me to see them as a marker of how I should think and feel, and how my relationship should be. So I always say to people to maybe look at what those are for you. So look at your relationships that you have now, your friendships, and you can probably identify the ones that might be a secure attachment style. And you'll probably always have maybe one or two. And just look at the differences in the way that they are. With these people, I used to go out for dinners with them when I was actually attached, and I've spoken about this before. And I'd be in a relationship, or I'd be dating someone, and the entire conversation, the entire time, was just about over analyzing this dating scenario, this relationship. And they were fantastic at holding that space for me. But when it came to, their relationship and what was going on for them, they had very little to say. And it wasn't, and I realize now it's because mine was about my anxiety. I was trying to control a situation. I was trying to overanalyze a situation. For them, they were secure in their situation, so there's not actually a lot to say. And actually now I am that person. I am that person now that I'm a secure attachment. I rarely have anything to say to my friends. So it's so funny, because I used to be the person that literally took up the entire conversation, and I just needed so much help and support, because I didn't trust myself, and I was so anxious, and I just needed to dissect every single last text and every single last conversation, and figure out my play-by-play action of how should I be, how should I respond, what should I do if they do this, and what should I do if they do that. I used to have to be that person. And now, because I'm secure in myself and in my relationships, I really don't have a lot to say. So I go out for dinners now, and actually I just hold the conversation, and I'm just happy to hear about other people. And I'm just like, yeah, everything's good. Thank you. I just don't know. And it's so funny seeing that difference. And I can see now that it really was just my anxiety, um, my anxious attachment style. So if you are experiencing that, know that that is just a symptom of your anxious attachment style. And when you do the work to move to a secure attachment style, all of that goes because you have that trust in yourself. Like, I rarely need to ask someone for advice now. I rarely need to ask how to handle a situation. It's just, I mean, of course, there are going to be times when, you do need friends for those kind of things, but it's just a lot less now because you trust yourself and you're secure in yourself and you know yourself so much better. And you're not needing that validation from outside of you anymore. So it's like you are the validation. So you just don't need it anymore. I can't explain it, but you'll understand. And if you're noticing that, then it's a good sign that you're moving in the right direction. Um, but yeah, so these were these incredible secure friendships that I love and appreciate so much, and really helped me a lot. And when I think back to it now, I think, oh my God, like, thank you so much. Like, thank you for listening to me for all those hours, because I realize now how that was just all my anxious attachment style. I just didn't know it then. And yeah, they really held me down, and I'm so grateful for those. So yeah, look at those people and see the way that they are, and because I always found that was a really helpful marker for me. And then I have friends that are anxious, and you know anxious people, we're great friends. We love closeness. We have no boundaries, so we'll give you our everything. We are great at holding space, and we are great at emotions, and dealing with all of those things. So again, amazing listeners that I'm so grateful to have. Um amazing close friendships that I'm able to like call any moment, and just if I'm crying or if I'm upset, they're the people that I'm able to do that with, as well as secure people, of course, secure attachment. And I'm really grateful for those friendships. One thing I will say is that now looking at it, back then it was great because they really understood my anxious thoughts, they understood my fear, they understood my behaviors, and so they made me feel very validated in them. But I also see now, as a secure attachment, how they also would have aided a lot of that, would have aided a lot of that fear, because as anxious attachment style, we tend to naturally have a more negative mindset and a more fearful based mindset. So, if there's too many of us banding together with our overthinking thoughts go spiraling all together, you need somebody that's going to say, no, this is not correct, this is your fear, stop. And sometimes you can actually just you can, two anxious people together can tend to just, make the story bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that also doesn't help your anxiousness. So that's one thing to note there. But obviously it helps that everyone understands each other. There is one thing I will say is that with anxious attachment style, we do, because we can take things personally quite easily, and we can feel quite rejected because of our abandonment wound. It can mean that sometimes, you know, these friendships can be a bit trickier to navigate because there can be an expectation, there can be triggering of our wounds and needs that we need from people. So we can take things personally, and I will say that sometimes that shows up in anxious friendships, um, which are limited when you move to more of a secure attachment style. Okay, sorry, I'm just taking a little sip of my coffee as I could feel my throat was getting more croaky. Okay. And then the other aspect is avoidant attachment styles. So um, I have friends that are very close to me. I have, in particular, one best friend who is like a sister to me from childhood, and she identifies with an avoidant attachment style. And the truth is that when I was anxious attachment style, I really struggled with this friendship. And, we've had to navigate this friendship. We've had to work at this friendship together. And I say together because she has definitely done this too. And I know lots of people say avoidance don't do the work, and I understand there's a stigma around that, but actually I've known quite a few avoidants that do the work and are very aware. So I just want to get rid of that stigma slightly, because that's not true. I also think there are a lot of negative perspectives on avoidance, and I get that, because when I was anxious attachment style, and you're going to hear that from the stories that I share soon, um it was really easy for me to blame everyone else. It was really easy for me to blame the avoidant, because I felt that the avoidant was doing something to me, and it was triggering me, and it was hurting me. um so I definitely, if I would have been recording this podcast episode when I was actually attached, the perspective and the things that I would have said and about my avoidant friends, for instance, would have been really negative. And that's because I was so hurt, and I was so taking everything personally, because my anxious attachment style was triggered and because of my wounds were triggered. But I see things very differently now, because what I really see is that, and this is why I always try and create neutral content when it comes to avoidance as much as possible, but not because I am trying to defend anyone, because I'm not. I only work with anxious attachment style pretty much. I do work with some avoidance sometimes, but but essentially, I am, everything I do is for anxious attachment style. But the reason why I try and create more neutral educational content around avoidance is, rather than hate that I see in a lot of my comments, is because blaming them never ever ever did anything for me. It just kept me in victim mode. And sure, like, it kept me in victim mode, and it actually just kept me hurting myself, feeling more rejected. But I was rejecting myself with this stuff. And so actually just having the understanding of how an avoidant operates helped me so much more than blaming them. Understanding was so much better than blame. And also, me understanding my attachment style and taking responsibility for my anxiety was life changing for me. So that's why I always try and create that kind of neutral response to it, because that is genuinely what's going to help you get out of victim mode of feeling that something is doing this to you. And you'll be able to take responsibility, because even though an avoidant, yes, I understand it is painful, and I know that they trigger your wounds. I get it. I've been there. I've felt it all. It's horrible, 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 horrible. But one thing that I had to realize is they were just triggering wounds that were already in me. I already had an abandonment wound from my childhood. I already had a rejection wound from my childhood. My inner child was already wounded and feeling these things. So, yes, the avoidant was triggering these things, and it was hurting me. But actually, when I took responsibility for, wow, these are the things in me that I need to work on and heal, because they were already there from my childhood, that was way more powerful than me focusing on what an avoidant was doing to me, rather than actually, no, I'm going to take control of this so that nothing can affect me like this. I don't care what somebody does, it's never going to make me feel like this ever again. That was more empowering than blaming what this person was doing to me. And at the end of the day, this podcast is more around friendships, but while I'm on the subject, the reason why we attract avoidance, if we're looking romantically, is because of our beliefs around, working hard for love and love being inconsistent. But that is coming from our childhood beliefs. It's coming from us. And they're just a reflection of that. That is why that's happening. So actually, when I was able to turn it around to me and look at what do I need to do and take responsibility of me instead of looking at them and blaming them, it really helped me. And then the other aspect of things was that I was able to really understand, oh, I have these beliefs and my coping mechanism is because of my childhood and my wounds. Hold on one second. They have their own wounds and they have their own beliefs, and that's their trauma, and that's because of their childhood. Do I really get to, you know, who am I? Who am I that I have my own stuff that causes me to overthink and sabotage relationships and be needy sometimes and do things and things that I can't control and have expectations and all these things? Who am I to have these things but say that an avoidant can't have these things too? Who am I? No, I had to be like, no, you know what? Let me just look at this. I have my own wounds and my own beliefs. They have theirs. Yes, I understand it's painful for us, but actually, this is a great opportunity for us to do something and see these triggers as something for us to work on. And also to understand and have that compassion of, okay, they are dealing with those things, and let me understand their attachment style so that I don't need to take it personally. I don't need to add that on to me. I just need to stay focused on what I'm doing and my journey and my healing. And when I was able to do that, it was so much better because it allowed me to get to a secure attachment style. Whereas if I would have carried on just blaming avoidance, then I would have just been in victim mode and I would still be anxiously attached. So that is why I always create neutral content around these things. And even though I see the comments that are very against avoidance, actually, if you can look at it from that way, that they are only triggering something in you that already exists. And actually, that is your opportunity to do something about it so that nothing and no one can trigger you. That is where you're in your power. Um, but back to the story of friendships, when I was anxious attached and I didn't know I had an anxious attachment style, my relationship with my avoidant best friend was tricky. I used to take her boundaries as personal because I didn't have boundaries myself. I used to see them as a rejection for me, but instead of her actually just doing what was best for her and having her own time management or energy management system, which actually now I think is absolutely amazing. And I am that person too. But back then, when I was anxiously attached, I never had any boundaries. She was actually the first person that ever taught me what a bloody boundary was. I remember being a teenager and I grew up in an environment where we didn't have boundaries and I had no idea what they were. And I remember her talking to me about boundaries. And I remembered thinking to myself, what is a boundary? And I think I Googled it or something. And I was like, that was when I first started to learn, oh, healthy relationships actually have boundaries. So actually, an avoidant having boundaries isn't an unhealthy thing. Actually, healthy relationships should have boundaries. But it's difficult for you as an anxious attachment style because we don't really have any boundaries when we're anxiously attached. And actually, yes, an avoidance boundaries can be a bit rigid. And, I laugh about these things to them myself, but that's just how they are. That's how they are. It protects them. It's fine. Okay. Now I understand boundaries are a healthy thing. It's not about me. It's not personal. It's a lot easier to deal with. But when I was actually attached, it was difficult. So if you have relationships and maybe you feel, you know, rejected by them having boundaries, and I'll be honest, some of these boundaries you might not understand. They might be a bit rigid for you, but actually, by looking at it and just like seeing it as, okay, that's their boundaries that make them feel good. How can I have boundaries that make me feel good? And just seeing it as this is okay. It's okay to have these. So now, as a result, as a secure attachment style, I have boundaries. And I respect their boundaries so much more because I expect my boundaries to be respected as a secure attachment style. And so, therefore, I'm able to respect hers and I'm able to have my own and respect mine. Whereas when I was anxiously attached, I didn't have them and I just saw them as negative. And they're actually not really, they're not negative. Boundaries are a wonderful thing. They keep you in a really good way where you're not overgiving and you feel good and you're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your energy, your time, the things you want to do. They're actually a wonderful, 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 wonderful thing. And so I think it really helped to understand that that's what it was and it wasn't about me. And also for me to have my own boundaries and respect them myself. Now, the other thing that I used to really struggle with in that relationship was I used to feel really rejected when perhaps they wanted to spend time with other friends. And again, I know that this was just my anxious attachment style, and I didn't realize that at the time. And one thing that really helped me was realizing that actually, avoidant attachment style, they like to have more friends than less as such. They like to have, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be as close to everyone, but they're going to have, they will have more social activities, they will have more friendships as such. Whereas I am somebody that doesn't necessarily need that. I prefer closer friends, maybe less friends. But that's one thing I had to realize was that, okay, this is just how they operate. And again, that's how they feel good. And that's okay. Them making time for me is wonderful because they love me and they want to make that time, but also understanding that they're not going to be that kind of necessary close friend all the time. There's other friends that I could probably maybe see more often. There's other friends that I could speak to every day, and sometimes the avoidant friend is not going to be that friend. And I had to understand that. I had to accept that that was that friendship, and that's okay. Accepting it for what it was healthier than trying to make it fit something just because I felt rejected otherwise. And I know that it's difficult because some of you will want those close relationships with them, I understand. But actually, this is where it's good to kind of have different friendships with different things. One thing I've learned is that necessary and avoidant will not necessarily be that one that I will, you know, call crying if I've got this big problem, because they're not always able to hold the space emotionally for that, and that's okay. There'll be other people I can do that with. Or they might not be the person that I speak to every day just to speak to, or that text every day. And that's okay because there are other people for that. But one thing I have learned to do is realize, and this again gets so much easier when you have worked on your own inner wounds, otherwise you see it from a rejection. But one thing I've realized is actually they've got wonderful qualities about them that really help me, you know, to just appreciate them as it is. Actually, they're really great at boundaries and they've taught me to be really good at boundaries. So that is wonderful. I've got lots of friends that are not good at boundaries at all. And so that's great. I've learned some wonderful things like that. They're also really reliable people, or what I've found anyway, that, they'll always be the one that will show up to your birthday, or we'll plan things with. They'll plan a dinner with you, or they'll plan an event with you. I've got lots of friends that are terrible at making commitments, or terrible, like they're not that good at those things. I might not see them for an entire year, but yet with an avoidant friend, I actually, they are more regular with these things. They are good at planning, they are good at those kind of things. So I really appreciate those things. And I also see the ways that they do show me love. So they might not be the person that, knows everything about what's going on in my life on the day to day, but they might be really thoughtful and show, get me something that they just know that I will love. Like, and I just know that that's their way of showing me that they love me and that they care. And or they'll do something else for me, or maybe I have something more practical that I need help with. They'll be the one to help me with that. So I've really learned to see the different strengths in these people and kind of just accept each person for what that is, and each friendship for what that is, because there is a need for that as well. There's wonderful qualities that they have that other people aren't going to be able to give you. And so being able to like enjoy that for that what that is really 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 has helped me in navigating these friendships, and it's taken the pressure off them, so that our friendship is in like such an amazing space, because I just accept and love them for them, and they just accept and love me for me. And as a result, there's none of that conflict. Over the years, we've had many, many, many communications where we've had many, times where I felt rejected or they felt away, and we've had to work through those communications. And, when I was very anxiously attached, it was very blame, blame, blame. When I was less anxiously attached, it was a little bit more neutral. And now, actually, we haven't had one of those in many years. But now it would be a very different thing. I just, well, now I don't know. There's just not anything that I think is a problem, because I just don't see things in the same way that I used to. And I think that love and acceptance has just made it a lot easier to just accept the relationship as it is and enjoy the relationship for what it is. But that does come with time. So, I understand that that's not always necessary. But I think the one piece of advice that I'll give you is that with an anxious attachment style is that we naturally will see things from a place of fear and rejection and abandonment. And so understanding that and just accepting sometimes, and then being able to like flip that perspective. And I know that's hard, because in the times when I felt really anxious, I would have struggled to do that myself, which is why it's really important that you soothe your nervous system to be able to do this. You self soothe. And if you just challenge yourself to just see things from the perspective of love a little bit more, and try and see things from the perspective of a positive rather than a negative. And I know it's hard, it takes a while to train your mind this way, then I think that will help. So if you try and look at the positive of what somebody's doing for you and what the relationship is and these things, and try and focus on those, that will really help you. And I know that it's not always easy, but that is my general advice, is if you can focus on the positive more, it's gonna bring more positive for you. Um, in your friendships and in every aspect of life. Um, and I think the other thing is just, there were times when I used to really doubt, because of my anxious attachment style, I used to doubt her love for me. I used to doubt our relationship. I used to doubt those things. And actually, I can see that that was just fear. That was all fear. And that happens in romantic relationships as well. So these things are all intertwined. And again, this is where I just want to challenge you to look through the perspective of love, even if the love does not fit the box you are trying to give it. And I'm just going to pause for a second for you to really take that in. As an anxious attachment style, we have all of these ideas of what love is, and a lot of them are just really based on fear. They're not actually based on love. They're just based on us getting our reassurance and our anxiety soothed. And I say that with love, as obviously somebody that did it and was it. And when I learned to just accept love as what it was, and not try and make it fit my expectations of you know, well, they have to do this or they don't love me. Well, they didn't do this, well, they must not love me, or they didn't send me a good morning message. If we're looking at romantic relationships, they don't love me. Well, this person did this and this person didn't do this, so they must not love me. When I got rid of all of those kind of rules and expectations and things that were really just hurting me, they were hurting me, that helped. And I was just able to just be like, of course, this person loves me. It doesn't matter that their love might look different to someone else. Let me focus on the way, all the ways that they do love me. And since I was able to do that, it's like our relationship just got so much better and better because I wasn't looking at the negative and I wasn't focusing on that, and we weren't stuck in that, and I wasn't taking things personally or rejected. I was able to just like enjoy it for what it was and see all the wonderful ways that this person is expressing their love. And yes, avoidance can be different. They can. And I get that. But it's also a wonderful thing. And so I think that really helped. So I challenge you to, you know, and to look at that and look at your ideas of what that looks like for you, you know, what the stories you're telling yourself um are, and just trusting that of course they love you and of course they want the best for you. I think that really helps. Um, and just don't take things personally as much. I know that that is difficult, but you know, understanding as much as you can, educate yourself as much as you can on the way that avoidant works, I think really, really helps. And just know that any distance they put, it's not to hurt you. It's just the way that they're wired. It's not about you, it's about them. And the best thing you can do is just like stay focused on you, working on your healing, working on you know, you making you feel as good as you can. That is your only job. And they must do what's best for them to make them feel as good as they can. And unfortunately, as an anxious and avoidant, you have very different operating systems that make you feel good. You have the absolute opposite. You know, one needs independent space and one needs closeness and reassurance. I get that. And you must do what you need to do to get your needs met, and they must do what they need to do to get their needs met. And that way, once you're both doing that for yourselves, the relationship is a much more harmonious relationship because you're not requiring that from each other. So try not to take it personally when they're doing that. You know, the other thing is give them space. You know, resist the urge to chase after them. Understand that this friendship might be a little bit different to other friendships. Let them like come your way. Like I find that, you know, um I don't, you know, I find that when I just let it be, it's a much nicer friendship, you know. um I don't try and force things. I trust that you know, they're very busy, and I trust that they'll make time for me and I'll see them, and I trust that I'm important. And this has taken time to get here, by the way. So I'm just giving you from this perspective because I definitely wouldn't have trusted this so much when I was actually attached. So I'm only giving it, you know, this is what I've learned to do, is be like, no, no, and let it be. And they come my way and it's beautiful and we have a wonderful time. And it helps that I'm very grounded in myself and very secure in myself, and you know, doing my own thing. But that has definitely helped. So give them the space that they need. It's gonna help the friendship, is what I can say. The other thing is like be direct and clear. Like avoidants do appreciate straightforward communication. So, you know, it's okay to say, hey, I'd love to catch up when you're free, or hey, I miss you. Can we do dinner soon? Or um, you know, I have another avoidant friend, and they hadn't um normally they would have made a plan to see me before Christmas and they didn't. And that's totally fine. But then I thought, I hope they're okay. So I reached out to them the other day and was just like, hey, is everything okay with you? Because I think you probably would have asked this, you probably would have made a plan to see me before now. So I'm just checking everything's okay. And from that perspective, I wasn't like, oh my God, you've not reached out to me. It wasn't like that in any shape or form. I was literally like, oh, this is a bit unusual. I hope that they're okay. I hope everything's okay. And when you address it from that curiosity rather than like well, I can't believe you haven't asked to see me, which is just not a thing for me now. Maybe when I was actually attached, I might have been more like that. But now it was, when you come from that place of genuine curiosity and care, of just asking, hey, I noticed that you might have, is everything okay? Because I noticed there was a difference in this. Are you okay? Then it's a much better expression because you're expressing yourself, but you're doing it from a general care rather than an expectation that puts a pressure on the relationship. And as a result, they completely responded and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to worry you. Yes, I'm totally fine. This is the reason why. And let's get a date for this. So, and then there's a date in the diary now. It allowed them the space to like come back in a really good way because I wasn't blaming them. I was just like, expressing my thing of like, are you okay? Is everything okay? Because I noticed this. And so try and do it from that kind of perspective, like, use I statements. Don't use you haven't done this, you haven't asked to see me, you did this, you didn't respond for 24 hours. Those things are attacking someone. And to be honest, even an anxious person is going to feel very defensive with those kind of situations. And an avoidant definitely is. They're going to shut down. You're probably not going to get the best response from them. And one thing I will say is that you might not even realize you're doing this, because I know that when I was actually attached, I thought I was the best communicator. I thought I was so good at communicating. Well, I didn't think I was that, but I definitely feel that there were times when I had tried to have these conversations and I thought I was better than I was. But really, I realize now that because I was so anxious and I was looking from the perspective of fear and blame and hurt, it meant that I wasn't really able to articulate myself. And it did mean that I created um, conflict in situations. I can see now, if I'm being really honest, and I think I realized that I wouldn't have realized that now. I wouldn't have realized that back then because of my anxiety. So I'm being really honest with you now that you probably don't even realize sometimes how your anxiety causes you to communicate in a really hurt way, which can cause somebody to get their back up. And actually, my advice to you and to everyone is always to calm your nervous system. Do not respond when you are triggered. Take days, take weeks if you need to. I don't care. That is the best way for your friendship and your relationships, is actually take your time to soothe yourself, get yourself in a neutral place, and look at the perspective of their perspective, your perspective, what you need to happen for this to come to for the whatever the situation is, and look at it from a neutral place rather than, well, you did this and you hurt me, because that is just not going to get what you need. Yes, it's great for you to say how you feel, and this is why you should always use I statements. I felt hurt because of this. I feel this way. This is going to be different to you did this. You made me feel like this. No, you must take responsibility for your feelings and how and what you're saying. And then that opens the space for them to say, well, I felt like this. And then it creates that neutral ground in the middle where you can both say what you feel, you can both hear each other, and then you can both say, okay, so now we've heard each other, how do we move forward, for instance? What is a compromise here? And I'll be honest, me and my avoidant best friend, we've had to do this many times throughout our relationship. And it's really healthy when you do that. So, you know, definitely use direct communication with them, but always be conscious of the place that you're coming from. Make sure your anxiety is neutral, and make sure you are not using attacking language, because that will cause them to shut down. And just, always bring it back to you, how you feel, and your responsibility in that, and your understanding of a situation and how it happened, and listen with an open ear as to their perspective and how they feel. And that will always make it easier for you to come to a compromise that works for both of you, and for you to feel relieved that of course they care, of course they want to hear what you have to say, as well as you have to give that back. You have to do that for them too. You have to create that safe space for them too, as well as them creating that safe space for you. And then harmoniously, you can both create that for yourselves. And then the last thing I would just say is just, you know, just focus on you as much as you can. Your only job in this life is to make you feel good, to make you feel happy, to prioritize your needs. And I know that's hard as an anxious attachment style, but that is what you need to do. You need to make sure you're filling up your own cup. So invest in your own self, invest in your development, invest in your hobbies, invest in your friendships, your self-care, all of those different things, and try not to rely on one source for that. Rely on yourself, getting it from all different ways. You know, when I started to open myself up to all the different ways that make me feel good and make me feel soothed, and so now I have so many different things I could be doing with my time that make me feel good all the time, that I don't need to rely on seeing this friend for me to feel good or for me to feel soothed. I don't need to rely on that. I can do that for myself. I have lots of different ways to do that, and I think that helped to take a lot of the pressure off, as well as it makes you feel secure in yourself. Anyway, sorry, my voice might be going now. I think I've spoken a lot. I I really just spoke that from my heart. I didn't really have too much of a plan as to what I was going to say there. I hope that it has helped you to provide to I've helped I hope that it's helped someone to just like see something from a bit of a different perspective that might help you in your relationships and your friendships. Um, you know, these things do take time. They are a skill to navigate these things, and you know, your feelings are valid, everything is valid, and just be kind to yourself and fill yourself up with love, and just know that, you know, everything is working out beautifully, and your friendships will work out, and yeah, your friendships will work out the best way they can, and the best way you can do that is just to love and accept yourself, and try and love and accept them as they are. And in my opinion, that has been probably the most effective way to be able to just enjoy my relationships in a harmonious way. Anyway, I hope that has helped. Do let me know how you found this episode. I'd love to hear from you, any key takeaways, and send me a DM, send me an email. Let me know if you have any topics you want me to discuss. I hope that has helped, and I will see you again on the next episode.